Hey, David Brewster here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of King Diamond. And I've had a lot of requests for Andy LaRocque and the music of King Diamond leading up to October, which is Metal Month. And I did feature Andy in a 3-for-all last year around this time in October, and we looked at some of his licks and lead playing. Also Michael Moon, who played with King Diamond on the Abigail tour. But this lesson is going to focus on his rhythm playing and chord-based ideas and really tap into Andy's musical genius. I'll be totally honest, before I made this lesson, I was familiar with King Diamond's music, Welcome Home and some of these different songs. I remember, music videos on Headbangers Ball, but I'd never really, dove into his albums and listened to all the music. And I basically did the same thing that I did for the Fates Warning lesson, is, in preparation for this lesson, I listened to every single King Diamond song, every album, and tried to figure out what I was going to teach and show in this lesson. And I uncovered some really interesting things, but definitely King Diamond's a legend, in metal. King Diamond's band formed in 1985 after, Merciful Fate disbanded. Merciful Fate, really only had 2 albums, and they broke up. But those 2 albums definitely were very influential and respected. And then King Diamond continued. He's had 12, studio albums, 2 or 3 live albums, and some compilations. But definitely a legend of metal music. But one thing I noticed going through all the albums and listening to all the music is typically, the first track on a King Diamond album is usually this kind of haunted kind of intro track, like a minute and a half or so. Usually less than 2 minutes of this kind of horror kind of soundtrack or whatever. And then typically, not every album, but a lot of the albums have instrumental, moments. And I did make a chart here, or an image, showing 6 songs from just scattered, King Diamond albums. And I'm sure I missed some, so feel free to, jump in the comments and point out some other instrumentals. So I really wasn't, focused on the intro tracks, where it's just kind of spooky. I was looking for instrumental, guitar music, but there's some really cool stuff kind of hiding between the songs, in King Diamond's albums. With the intro, that was the song Halloween from Fatal Portrait, and they're using these kind of partial, mutated power chords. I call them the accept, balls to the wall chords. But, it's based around an E power chord, and then they're moving the fretted part around. Something like this. And you can hear a ton of bands playing riffs like that. Iron Maiden, of course, Accept, I've got Dream Theater, a ton of groups. And like I said, we're just moving the fretted part around, so there's an E power chord. And it's kind of like an implied E power chord, and then I guess like an F5 over E, the E power chord, and then a D5 over E. Just kind of grabbing those little pieces of chords, but E is the root note. And right there, just move up from a partial, F, partial G, partial A with that E root note. Like that. Pretty cool the way it's kind of moving up the neck too. And then just pump that low E and then a D power chord, the C power chord. Do all that again. And at the end, just end on an E power chord up there, like this. Cool riff. Right up next is the song Haunted, which is also from the Fatal Portrait album, and it's something like this. Really cool, and I love that last part. It reminds me of Rush a little bit. But in the beginning, we're still using those kind of mutated power chords, you know, moving from an E power chord to an implied, you know, F5 over E, back to the E power chord, and then he's kind of moving between G and G flat. So he's doing this. You know, just kind of moving. And I also kind of figured out a way to do that with, you know, every fret hand finger, just as, you know, an additional challenge, or, you know, just kind of using every digit. I guess you could use, you know, 2 fingers and just kind of shift, but I'm actually using all 4 of my fingers there just as a challenge and just to flesh all that out. You know, really cool. And then right here, this is basically an E sus2, like that next section, this part. It's like an E sus2. This is an F sharp minor. And you're going back and forth between that. You're just moving that index finger back and forth. And it's really cool to play, you know, F sharp minor like that with that open A string. I like that. And then there's an implied, you know, G major 7 right there too. Like this. But it reminds me of Rush or Dream Theater or somebody like that. Really cool riff. Up next is Lurking in the Dark from the Fatal Portrait album, and I promise we are going to move away from that album. I do like Fatal Portrait though. But Lurking in the Dark, something like this. And it's definitely a good picking workout too. I was trying to really make sure I didn't screw that up. But you'll see we're basically playing with this, a D power chord, and then it's going to move to augmented, you know, raised 5th, and then a D power chord, and then he lowers it to the flat 5. So he's definitely playing with the 5th right there, that A note, you know, A sharp and also A flat. You know, it's a D chord, but I'm talking about the actual note that we're moving there, that A. So that would be a D5, you know, D augmented, D5, and then a D flat 5. And we keep going back to that D note, you know, on the A string, and that's the picking workout big time. But once you get used to that, you know, change in the chord, then you need to get used to the picking too. And then do the exact same thing, but move it down to B, and then you're going to have B5, and then B augmented, B5, and then B flat 5. And those kind of riffs are really good for waking up your picking hand and just really attacking, you know, the strings. Very aggressive. Right up next is a section from The Family Ghost, which is from the Abigail album, and it's something like this. can see we're kind of doing this, single note line, and once again he's kind of playing with the augmented, the raised fifth. But he's kind of separating that. Kind of playing like this melodic line, but it is kind of chord-based in a way. And then from there, just basically move to an A power chord to a D power chord. And then right there, you're going to basically hit the D and then move to the A. Something like that. Exact same thing, but move it to A flat right here, and you'll find a lot of King Diamond's music. I don't know if it's King Diamond's influence or Andy or who's directing, things to shift, but you'll find riffs and chord progressions and patterns in their songs where they'll establish it in one key and then they'll move it either lower or higher. And I like that, where you're kind of varying the same idea. It sounds different even though it's the exact same thing, like this. It just sounds cool to hear it, kind of shifted in a different key. So if you're writing a song and you have a great riff, don't be afraid to maybe repeat it somewhere else and kind of move it into another key instead of just writing another section. You might actually lock into that same idea and just, shift it. All right, up next we have the song Sleepless Nights from the Conspiracy album. And definitely Andy is no slouch for creating these kind of eerie, clean and suspenseful, chords. And earlier I flashed that image with the instrumental music, kind of that I spotted in King Diamond's, music or his albums. And Andy definitely, has these kind of, atmospheric and kind of ambient, almost beautiful acoustic moments. And then that's a contrast to the abrasive and heavy, guitar parts and stuff. And it's really cool to hear that kind of light and dark, kind of twist. But Sleepless Nights, this is kind of like the verse section, but you've got this. Really cool. So that's like a D minor add 9. And then this is D minor 7. And that's going to be a D minor 13 right there. Really cool. And for another example of these kind of cleaner chords, hiding in King Diamond's music, check out the song Black Horseman from the Abigail album, and you'll hear something like this. Really simple, but it sounds really cool, and I love that kind of change or the progression, in the second half. But the first part right here, that's going to be a B add 9, or I'm sorry, B add 11. And then when you move it down, it's an A add 9. So B add 11 and A add 9 right there. A minor add 9. And you're just moving back to that B at 11. But I love that progression. It has a very haunting kind of flavor to it. last example is from the song Welcome Home, which is from the Them album, and I did feature this in the first Headbangers Ball Chordplay episode, but I'm talking about King Diamond, so I had to feature this again. And Welcome Home is something like this. Once again, we're starting or establishing a riff and an idea in one key, and then it shifts into another key. And, it starts here in A. And we're, once again, kind of playing with the same thing that we had earlier, but, here we're in the key of A instead of the key of B. We're kind of doing this E, F, E, D maneuver, which is very similar to what we had up here. And then right there, a C power chord, B power chord to G. And then go to a G note, and then C, G, C. And you can move the power chord like that, or you could just move your third finger. Either way. And then move to B right there. And then you've got D to C sharp to A power chords. And right there, move to an A note. And then D, A, D power chords. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of King Diamond. And as I mentioned earlier, I'd never really dove into King Diamond's music, that heavy until this lesson, or the preparation of this lesson. And I knew Andy, I was honestly more familiar with Andy's playing from the Death Individual Thought Patterns album than King Diamond's music, because I dove into that Death album. And then with King Diamond, I heard certain songs, I remembered the videos, I was familiar, with who it was. I just never really went there until now. So I do want to thank you for the requests and the comments, that kind of steered me this way. Because I did pick up, some newfound appreciation for not only Andy LaRocque, but also King Diamond too. He's a very intelligent, kind of misunderstood, vocalist and musician. But definitely King Diamond's actually, very intelligent. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and I was kind of surprised when I read, some interviews and kind of read a little bit about him. I thought he was going to be this crazy maniac, and it's like, no, he's actually a very sensible, kind of intelligent person, like I said, so what a shock. But anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Midnight Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.